everybody, it's T. Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our discussion about flow. And I thought I'd like to pick up where we left off because we left off with only one piece out of 8 that we hadn't talked about. And it's really very much around these 8 words that you see on the chart in front of you. Remember, in order to get this to overlay on the change grid, all we had to do was rotate this exact diagram 45 degrees. Is that what we said? Yeah, 45 degrees clockwise. And then, because skill level will definitely parallel ability, even though skill is only one of the 4 component elements that make up ability. And challenge is going to line right up with challenge. And so that's all great. So it maps really, really, really well, as we talked about on the last call, though we had varying levels of issue with several of these different identifiers. And we worked our way around it. We talked about flow, and then we went up grid a little bit and talked about arousal, and down a little bit to talk about why we might feel like we're in control, and then anxiety being up in stress, and relaxation being far down grid, but a lot more happens there. So we had, I think, quite a nice discussion about all those. We even talked about boredom. And then we got over to the ones that are a bit, somewhat problematic. But the one we didn't talk about was worry. And so worry would occur on the change grid, or when you consider your level of ability to be low and the challenge to be moderate. And you can even see on this composite diagram, you see we have these diagonal gray lines that do in fact divide the change grid into those 8 different slices. And you can overlay those slices, easily enough to have the meaning come through in the whole thing. So it's all right here. So they're saying, like, here is where you're going to be someone who's worried, or this is where the situation may worry you. Now, worry is an interesting word because I think it's interpreted in a lot of different ways, and I think it has a lot of different levels to it. So, but worry, as in fretting about something, feels more upgrid than worrying about whether or not something unlikely to occur is actually going to occur, which would be more downgrid around it. So I don't think the worry tells the whole story, but it's interesting that this is labeled as worry because there is another layer of the change grid where we talk about the 8 roles that people can serve. Let me go to that one for just a second. That's not it. Yeah, that'll work. Is helper. We talk about the 8 roles. Well, if you're upgrid, the positive part of what you would be is an energizer. And here we got an influencer, and here we have a leader and an advocator and a thinker and an administrator and a follower. So we're basically saying that people who have a low perceived ability and are in a situation that represents a moderate level of challenge could be helpful, could step into the role to help something out. They're going to need a little bit of education. You're going to have to be thoughtful about how you're asking them to focus whatever little ability they have to do something that's only, moderately difficult. That's great. Help out. And I can think of countless situations where this would actually hold true in the real life kind of the situation. All right. So anyway, but I take issue with helpers always being worried. Anyone else have an issue with why worry would? I get it. People worry can occur here. And I would say that worry, no, let's just be more declarative about it. Worry does occur here. But worry does not tell the whole story. Not everyone who is in this part of the change grid is worried about something. Questions about that? Comments about that? Agree, disagree? Okay, so yeah.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, and so again, my issue with this diagram that we've found for flow psychology is that, and I said this before we began the recording, I become concerned when something is so simple that it tells the story in I'm going to say a very abbreviated way that may or may not represent the truth and therefore may or may not be helpful to the individual that we're working with.
Mhm. Yes.
So I think that the reason why we have a scale of 0 to 13, 0 to 12, a 13-point scale, is because we appreciate that there are many, many, many shades of gray. There are many shades of flow. There's many levels of relaxation. There's many aspects of boredom. But to think that the only 8 things that a human can experience are these 8 words, because that's what they're saying. They're saying, like, if you've got a level of ability that ranges from non-existent, or level of skill, rather, using their diagram, way down here at nothing, the lowest of the low, all the way ranging from the highest of the high, that the only things you can experience would be along this continuum. That, if you add the challenge to it, no matter what the challenge is, no matter what the combination is, these are the 8 things you're going to end up feeling. Does anybody else have an issue with that, or is it just me?
Yeah, that sounds incomplete.
It is incomplete. It's just too little. Now that then led us to the question of, well, why then would people of great academic background, which is certainly the case when it comes to chicks at High and many others that you'll see. In fact, I think Brian sent out to everybody a video. I think it was Stephen Kotler, I think, from Think Big. But anyway, there's a lot of really prominent thinkers with great credentials that are talking about happiness, and they're reductionists. They're trying to reduce it to this tiny number of identifiers and all that. And we know we're dealing with a whole person, not just with this situation we're describing. I know I'm babbling a little bit, but I'm rather annoyed by the whole situation of how much press these people get and how much exposure they get, and how they're basically marketing this very simplistic way of approaching happiness and putting it out there as though this is what you guys need to do. You want to be happy, you got to get in flow and stay in flow, because happiness doesn't occur outside of flow. And I say that's not true. That's not helpful, and it could in fact be damaging.
Yeah.
Anyone
I
else?
wonder, is that a product of number one, it works particularly well for marketing, but
Yeah,
like it's a product of they only know what they know. And they become known for that, because I remember, like, even when that research came out from the Florida State professor about 10,000 hours that Michael Gladwell wrote about in one of his books, and said it takes 10,000 hours to become a master at something.
okay.
And so it became really popular. And the professor came out and he says, well, that's not what it was meant to do. And I didn't finish the research.
Right. Right. Well, this is it. There's a whole group of people out there, many of whom happen to be in the human development industry. I've always said this as a joke, but there's a truth to it, that the world, our industry is filled with people that are talent heavy and content light. And so, because they don't have any significant content or even content of their own, they're out there looking for content that they can easily absorb and quickly turn around to be their message to the world, or the foundation of their platform, their practice, their training, whatever it happens to be. So there's always been a lot of highly talented people in search of something to say. And I think that's part of it. But the other thing is that, and you pointed out, from a marketing perspective, the consumer base is looking for a simple solution. So if you tell them, hey, all you have to do to be happy is get yourself in flow and keep yourself there. Well, I can sell books around that, and seminars and workshops, and do coaching sessions. I can have a very robust practice. Putting that out there because people want to buy it, and it's easy for me to provide. What's the problem with that? Well, to me, the problem with that is that it doesn't really apply as, what's the word I would use, as universally as they want to make it sound. Could it help
Exactly.
people? Absolutely. But there's other ways to help people, and there's a time when happiness becomes inherently problematic. And we talked about that before we were actually did our deep dive in the circle of brilliance about happiness and wanting to achieve that state of happy. Where does happy live on the change grid?
Mhm.
Yeah, so I know I'm babbling, but anyone want to throw any ideas before I take it to a new level of question mark?
Well, I'll jump in just really quickly. This is Nasir. I was really tracking what you were saying, T. It brings to mind the what's the saying about all models are wrong, but some are
Mhm.
useful. So to your point, the model is wrong in that it's not an accurate representation of, I think, the high context and nuance
Yes,
about
yes.
this. And some people may get some use out of it, but there's a danger in oversimplifying something that's a little bit more multifaceted. So
Absolutely.
point well taken.
Absolutely. Well, and I know, Nasir, you're kind of new to our world of ChangeWorks, but if you haven't heard it yet, you'll hear it. And you've probably heard a lot before, is that when we started doing this exercise of the merging of brilliance some almost 40 years ago, our goal was to say that every one of these model makers was contributing something that they thought was accurate in helping themselves and others to better understand how humans operate. And also all these models existed, and there's no exaggeration. There's hundreds of these models historically that have, how about this, been popular enough that you can actually find them on the internet, where there are countless things, for example, that I have in paper, in print, in book form, that you will find nothing on the internet at all. The biggest one of which is probably TAG, which is the transactional awareness game, that produced an astounding map of humanity that is some 3 feet by 3 feet in teeny tiny hand printed lettering. Well, we happen to have 3 of those things, and we had to do some very careful scanning and some sewing together of the different scanned areas of this giant diagram so that we could find some way to put it up on the internet so that it wouldn't be lost when these few remaining copies of the book and the game and this map that's part of the game are gone, then it's gone. And that would be a horrible loss. And so I'm just saying to you that how many models we have available to us today doing rather straightforward search has got to be a tiny fraction of all the models that have ever been put together. So we know that each one of those models that seems useful, seems accurate, seems legit at a certain level, as this one does with these 8 different states on it. We know that when you combine it with every other model that makes even more, that makes sense, you should add greater depth and understanding to the body of knowledge. All these models are trying to describe the exact same thing. And that's how does a human operate? And so people have tried it from every walk of life, from every angle. And if we instead of I want to say judging the models and then discarding those that don't pass muster, we simply say models that have merit deserve to have our group, the Circle of Brilliance, discuss them, explore them, and see if they can be integrated. If they can be integrated, then 2 things ideally happen, and that is that the integration of that model adds something to our understanding of the full range of humanity's behaviors and responses to things, and we should be able to add even more back to the model that came our way. So, so our model, the change grid, is supposed to have a space for every possibility of human behavior, human response, from the ridiculous to the sublime, from the horrible to the what to say, angelic. It's got space for everything, but in order for it to have that space and be that inclusive, we have to be willing to say that the simplicity of a model is not telling the whole story. What can we do to help people better understand the full story? So that's just that is your awareness or your orientation now to the whole circle of brilliance and the merging of brilliance activity that we do quite often.
In fact, it's probably the merging that is the issue with research in general. I remember my neuroscience professor used to always talk about, you know, a lot of research is not done. Neuroscience is considered the last frontier and still discovering things, but you don't see a lot of research coming out to the university. It stays within, number one, so they don't collaborate, they don't merge. And any research without being replicable or being repeated isn't complete.
Yes,
That's just a known fact, and so they don't do it often.
that's right. That's right. Well, so let's take this to the next level of scrutiny, if you will. You are looking at a two-dimensional model. All it's doing is comparing someone's level of skill to someone's perceived level of challenge at a specific activity or specific behavior level. I applaud all three of those. Thank you very much. It resonates, it overlays. In fact, it was one of the easiest overlays we've ever tried to do. So that's great. But it's a two-dimensional model. So here's your gifted students program question. How many dimensions are involved in a change grid? When we're asking someone to fill out a change grid, how many dimensions are they being asked to rate?
4.
4. Exactly, it's 4. And so we want to know, yeah, how big, we want to know how you rate your level of ability. We want to know your level of challenge, but the other two things that we want to know is how big is the activity? Do you perceive that activity as being? This talks to or speaks to the limitation that humans have on capacity to manage, handle, manipulate, whatever word you want to use, to juggle all the stuff that's on your plate at a given moment in time. Now, for example, size, which is something that does confuse people as they start to look at these 4 dimensions, but size is all about the level of resource consumption that the activity is going to require. So if I say to you, I'd like you to, or one activity on your list is going to get the mail out of the mailbox. You got to go to the mailbox and get the mail. People will rate their level of ability quite high to do that. They'll give it an 11 or a 12. I don't know what would make it, what ability are you lacking, but nevertheless, 11 or 12, we would think people go like, oh yeah, I can go get the mail. That's an 11 for ability. How challenging is it to go and get the mail? And now we hear people go like, well, a 0, a 1. I mean, it can't be a 0. You'd be motionless at 0. So obviously you have to physically go and do something. So there is some level of challenge that is involved in that. So even if it's just mustering the gumption to go and do it. So there is some challenge involved. Some people might give themselves, it's a 1. All right, that's an 11 or 1. What level of tension does that plot you in? For you to have an 11 or a 1,
Apathy.
it puts you down in apathy. Down here in
Feedback.
apathy again. You guys should be able to look at the composite diagram. I do want to. Oh, why do I keep doing that? Let's see. But for Nasir's benefit, I want to make sure that we're showing some of the individual layers one at a time, just so he can become more comfortable with the labelings that we use and where those labels belong on the various layers of the change grid. So it puts you down in apathy. You said your ability is an 11. The challenge is a 1. You're way down here in apathy. In fact, not only are you in apathy, you are in the, let's do this one. Is this one? You're in the downgrade danger zone. Where you're barely conscious. You might head off to get the mail and forget that you were heading off to get the mail before you get there. So because it just didn't require any conscious attention on your part, you're running on autopilot, you're down in the downgrade danger zone, which does not necessarily equate to danger, but there's a neglect that definitely happens down there. Now, according to this model, we'd say you're relaxed about going and getting the mail. Well, you could be relaxed, but remember we said boredom also happens down there, complacency, ambivalence, a lot of other things that happen to be falling in apathy. All right, now, for a moment, I want you to compare that to this activity. I would like you to completely clean all of the floors in your house. So they're dusty, they've got footprints. I want you to make sure that all the floors in your house are clean. Now, how would you, at our ages, how would you rate your ability to clean a floor? I would not be at all surprised to find out people say, well, they're an 11. I've cleaned the floor before. I know what I'm doing. It's an 11. How difficult is it to clean the floor? How challenging is it? It's not difficult. It's a floor. I'm just going to sweep it or mop it or whatever. So no, it's not very challenging at all to do it. My ability is very high. Lo and behold, I'm down in apathy about doing it. And so that alone is going to translate into how I feel around the task. So am I relaxed about being there? I don't know. I might be bored. I might be even beyond bored. I might be deep, deep down in apathy around doing it. Now, if you think about that for a second, then both of those activities, going out and getting the mail and cleaning every floor in your house, plotted in the exact same spot on the change grid when we look at it in 2 dimensions. Does that imply that those activities are equivalent in their overall, overall expression in your life? What do you guys think? How are those 2 tasks different? Y'all chime in. This is where you guys talk.
The importance, this necessity and importance.
Yeah, where's the importance factor in all of it? But the other one, it was the one that you guys are getting into all 4 dimensions now. Importance is there. But the second thing, now the 4th element is how big of the task is it? Mm-hmm. So how big, how many resources is going and getting the mail going to require versus the resources that are required to clean every floor in your house? In fact, what's the biggest resource where you're going to find a difference between those 2 activities?
Time.
Time. I can go out and get the mail and be back, in, well, I don't know. I haven't gotten lost in a very long time. I imagine I can get out there and back in a minute. So that's not it. But cleaning all the floors in your entire house, how many of you feel like that's a big job? That's going to take all day. So it doesn't matter that my ability is high and the challenge is low. If I've got to go and do that, I got to set aside the whole day. And so this is why we want people to think for a moment, how big of a task is this? How many resources is it going to consume? And again, just as a reminder for you, the reason why we do this, or kind of the thought process behind doing this, is we want people to kind of appreciate the fact that humans are we have a linear existence. And because we have a linear existence, there are issues of capacity that we need to factor in as we go about these activities of daily life. So if I said, I'd like you to kind of visualize that in front of you, there is a large, empty, lucite box, if you will. And that lucite box represents your total capacity to handle activities at a given moment in time, or for a given day, for a given time period. And as your day begins, you start to put things into that box, into that capacity. Well, every activity that is on your list, every duty that you have to fulfill, whatever it is, represents its own little cube. And that little cube is going to have to fit into the big capacity. So if inside of that cube, I've got, I'll give you two things: clean every floor in your house. And the second thing I'd like you to do is take an inventory of your entire wardrobe. Well, again, it's not like it's a difficult task, your ability to look at your wardrobe and count how many of whatever you got. This is hardly challenging. You've got a very high ability to do that, but it's another all-day task. And so can you fit both of those all-day tasks inside of your cube, or does it exceed your capacity to handle the work? Thoughts about that so far? Okay, so apply this for a second to business. How many companies have you worked with where there are managers, supervisors, leaders, owners, whatever, that don't seem to want to factor in this whole size of tasks as they start piling stuff onto their employees? You do this, you do this, you do this. At a certain point in time, the poor employee is saying, like, how many people do you see sitting here? I mean, I'm one person. I've got 8 hours. So that's the amount of capacity I have available. You can fill it with whatever you want to fill it with, but once it's full, it's full. How many of you have worked with individuals, business owners, whatever, who just don't seem to get that concept?
You all can't see this because it was audio only, but both of my hands are up.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. That's right. Exactly right. Exactly right. They don't get it. Well, it's a critical kind of a thing to take into account. Now, the fourth dimension that you guys mentioned, and then I'm going to bring this all together, is importance. So there are countless activities that are on our lists every single day. We do not bestow equal importance onto every one of those. For example, I got all kinds of stuff I need to do today. We got projects going on in the backyard. Linda's out of town for the next month. She spends the month of July at her sister's cottage in Michigan. So she's up there doing the Michigan kind of thing for the next month. And so I got gardens to take care of and a household to take care of, and on and on and on and on and on. I got all this stuff that basically needs to be done. That now, among the things that are on my to-do list, though, is that I need to renew my passport. My passport expires in February. And you guys know that if you want to travel internationally, they won't let you do it unless you've got 6 months or more time remaining on your passport. So I pretty much can't go anywhere until I get that passport updated. Well, the next time I'm traveling someplace where the passport is required is the weekend after Thanksgiving. So in the world of importance, in the world of tension, do you think that right now I'm more concerned about getting my passport renewed, or am I more concerned about making sure that Linda's dozen pots of annual flowers don't wilt in the desert sun? Where do you think my tension is? Yeah.
On those pots.
On those pots. Happy wife, happy life. If she comes home from Michigan and her flowers are dead, I'd better have a passport, because I'm going to be sent on my way. So anyway, so this is what we're saying, like, importance is also a big factor. And so when I look at a two-dimensional diagram, I say thanks, but inside of flow, it's not just saying my ability is good, it's nice and strong, and the challenge is nice and strong to get me engaged. All that's fine and dandy. I've got to get into flow about something I think is important to me, or to whatever. Well, one way or another, it's still important to me, or whether it's primary importance or secondary importance, it's still important enough to me that I get it done. So. And I said that only so that I could actually say whether the flowers survive or not, I personally do not care about. So, but I care very greatly about how much Linda loves her flowers. And so primary importance, not so much, but secondary importance, because it's important to Linda, is extremely high. Nevertheless, there is sufficient importance that that's what I'll end up focusing on. And hopefully I'll get around to doing the passport in enough time to, to make my travel deadline. So I think it's something that we have to say. It's like, look, if I as a business owner believe that all I have to do is make sure that you as an employee are always given activities that have a balance between high skill level and high challenge, then I've got you in flow and you're going to be as productive as I could want you to be. Well, where is that going to fall apart? How long before that's going to collapse? Brian, you're unmuted. You want to throw something in?
Well, I think that's why so many organizations have what I call sustainable mediocrity. Like there's this, they reach capacity quickly. Then there's just a lot of apathetic people there that want to grow, don't know how to grow, aren't given the resources to grow and develop. Again, when I was developing, helping a startup develop HR software, it said less than 4% of companies actually know how to model for performance and engagement, but yet they're always talking about we want high performing teams and we want engaged people, but no one models it.
Well, or what they want to model is the observable behavior.
Right,
Instead of
they don't
modeling
get
the belief system that the person holds, or the emotional state that accompanies with something, the visualization that's going on. This is all part of behavioral modeling, but because it's not externally observable, then okay, we kind of, what do we do? Set it aside, minimize it, trivialize it?
Right,
Whatever.
yeah.
And so this level of importance is definitely that. So really, we think of the change grid as being a three-dimensional cube. It really should be a change cube. And those dimensions would be challenge and ability, and then the z-axis would be importance. And so you can actually end up with a cube. Well, we know the higher the level of importance, the more likely you are to do something. So, and in fact, you can plot deep down in apathy based on ability and challenge. You can be down in apathy, but if the task is important enough, are you more likely to get it done? What's the answer?
Yes.
Yeah. We all have got tons of stuff that we just go like, oh, geez, do I really have to do this? Yes, I do. Fine, get it out of the way. And so when we have an employee or a client who has ended up with, I want to say, a life cluttered with unfinished minutia, because each of those activities taken one by one all plot down in apathy. And because people pay attention to where they find their tension, we know that these activities that are plotting deep down in apathy are not exactly commanding very much attention, unless the level of tension is sufficiently high that the person understands or accepts that it simply has to be done. It's important to them. It's important to whatever the overall objective is. One way or another, if they believe it's important enough, even though they're bored by the task or they would say relaxed. They're not relaxed, they're bored. In fact, bored to the point of resenting something. So a lot more going on, but so I get that. So importance ends up becoming a very, very critical dimension, and it is the vertical dimension, the third dimension, that would turn the change grid into a change cube. Now, going back to size, the thing that we know, and again, some people have difficulty visualizing this, so if that's the case, you let me know and I'll see if I can help you do this, is that every activity has its own change cube. So when you are looking at an activity like going and getting the mail, a change cube is formed. And inside of that change cube are your ratings for whatever it happens to be. Well, we already said that's a tiny little task. So this cube is like way, way down to the crystalline kind of level, so just picture it as being this
Mhm.
tiny, tiny little piece of clutter, dust. It's almost like activity dust, change dust. And so you can fit a lot of that into your big capacity kind of cube. On the other hand, you may have activities like cleaning all the floors or like finishing a particular project or like whatever it happens to be that represents, as far as a cube goes, it's a semi truck. And you just go like, it's so big, I can't even get it all done today. It's going to consume today's capacity, tomorrow's capacity. And there might not even be room for a lot of dust, but get it. Sometimes dust is going to find its way into little cracks and crevices in my capacity. And, I'll get that stuff done. And so we believe that while every activity is going to give rise to its own change grid, that those change grids are all of varying size based on the number of resources that activity is going to require and how that in turn impacts someone's capacity to handle or juggle all that. Okay, so anyway, I've babbled enough about that, but those are the 4 dimensions. We're looking at a 2-dimensional model. So what's missing here? I don't know how important it is, and I don't know what the resource
Mhm.
requirements are based on whatever activity we're looking at. So, yeah. Anyone have any thoughts, feelings about that, Brian?
So there, like, it can't really. This is where you'll experience something but not get something out of it. Like it's difficult to extract value out of it. I always talk about how the experience of the experience matter, so that because spatially, like, things that are front and center in your mind are going to get attention. But again, if it's
Mhm.
not surveyed for relevancy in terms of importance, how you apply yourself to it. That's why people can have great intention to do something, but
Yeah.
then the follow through kind of falls by the wayside.
Yep. Yep. And, that's also why we do, frequently remind people that the change grid does not exist solely on a piece of paper or on a computer screen in front of you. The real change grid is in your mind. And that change grid doesn't have 1 or 2 or a half a dozen or a dozen activities scattered about it. It has hundreds, perhaps thousands of activities that are on it simultaneously. And every one of those activities are in constant motion, moving up grid, down grid, in grid, out grid, up in importance, down in importance, magnifying in size, shrinking in size, whatever it is. These are all dynamic situations. And so as a result of that, when we bring importance up, we're bringing importance up for a practical reason. It really isn't feasible or worthwhile to try to engage someone in a discussion about dozens or hundreds of activities. We can't do that. Instead, we just say, let's focus on what is mission critical, what is most important to you. For whatever reasons, I'm not here to judge how you go about bestowing importance on something, but if you consider it important, then that's what we should be looking at. And so then we can, remove a lot of the clutter from a change grid or help people focus on the things that are really going to make a difference in their life and, whatever that activity list is being built around.
So when you were doing this with organizations, did you see that they were having difficulty understanding? Because what you're describing is true development. So
Mhm.
you know how organizations tend to treat training like, I call it bird droppings, where it's
Yep.
just, the trainer
Oh, yeah.
come and go, and as if you're not going to have problems once you implement something, you have new problems, right?
Well, of
So you're
course,
going
of
to still
course.
have to develop. And now it's kind of like, oh yeah, we set this training funding aside, for next year or for whenever, and that
right,
falls
right.
by the wayside. So
Yep.
then I understanding that just because you had a training, that again, you have to be able to apply the information.
Exactly. Well, let me share two things about that from my my experience, because you guys do know I consider myself to be primarily a trainer. So in the world of the four disciplines, speaker, trainer, coach, consultant, I think of myself as being a trainer. I'm not a coach. I'm not a counselor. I'm not. I mean, I'll do speeches or whatever, but that's not how I view myself or how I want to be viewed by others. I'm a trainer, and so one of the things that I often had to say to my clients was that before they decide about the duration of a training program, they have to answer the question, what do they want their people to walk away with? Based on what they want them to walk away with, I can tell them how long of a program is required. And I would give them a list of outcomes. So I'd start off with awareness. If you are happy with simply making your people aware of certain things, then for that, a program of a keynote length will be just fine. So half an hour to an hour, we can certainly give people some insights that will help them be aware of certain things that might be going on in their world, or aware of approaches they could take, aware of it. But that's all we can give them in that short amount of time is awareness. Now, if you want them to not only be aware of it, but you want them to understand it, or to have, then that's going to take a little longer, because we're going to have to do some exercises. They're going to have to play with the material. We're going to have to kind of put them a little bit to the test so that we know they understand something. Well, that might be something that we could do in a half-a-day program. Now, then I go like, now, if you want them to actually be able to practically apply it, we're going to need to have even more time. And I would keep building up on that, saying, like, if you want them to not only be able to apply it, but you want them to be able to apply it as part of a routine, a habit, that they've become so comfortable with it that it becomes their new default way of doing things, well, I'm going to need even more time. And if you want them to actually achieve mastery of something, it's going to take even longer. And so it would be amazing that they would want to start off hiring me to do a breakout session, and then realize that what they want their people to actually have is a certain level of comfort in applying the techniques with a bit of fluidity. And next thing you know, is now I'm being brought in for a 3 or a 4-day training program. So that was one thing I really had to get across to people, is like, you can't just throw training at something. We have to know training about what, for how long, etc. So this idea about what do you want them to walk away with. The other thing that I would say this to my clients, and it got some pushback periodically, as you'll assume after I tell you what it is. But I would say to them, you know, you guys, I think all know, I started off as a sales trainer. The very first way I ever applied tension management was specifically to selling. So paying attention to where a prospect's level of tension was, and learning how to monitor and manage the flow of productive tension during the sales call. I was a sales trainer and traveled all over the world doing great sales training programs for companies. But I would say to them as a joke up front, or just say to them, you know, one thing I have never, ever understood about companies like yours, I did primarily Fortune 500 companies, is that you require someone to have a 4-year degree to even apply for a position inside of your company. And then you expect them to learn how to sell at a level of mastery in 2 days flat. So I thought you had an appreciation for education. I thought you understood it takes time, it takes investment. So let's go into this with a realistic expectation. If you tell me all the time you have available for me to work with your team is a half an hour, okay, right, that's as a half a day, okay, fine. I will put together a program that fits into a half a day. You just have to understand that this is what they're going to walk away with. It sure isn't going to be fluency. So can you guys relate to what I've just said? Have you had clients who didn't seem to understand or appreciate that education takes time?
Yeah,
So
they confuse information with implementation.
there you go. I love that you get these little alliterations.
That's what it, and
Like you
don't you
collect,
see that like the education or institutions the same thing, right?
of course.
So, people are getting degrees, they're getting all this information, but then there tends to be a lack of applying it.
Yeah,
And so, that's where these micro degrees and all these things came out now because, okay, the cost of education, the time it takes, but we're getting people who don't know how to apply it.
right.
So,
Well, and let's even look at that. Here's another little dimension from your personal life experience. So here you are as a fully licensed physician outside of the United States. You come here and they want you to repeat your medical training, right?
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And you just kind of go like, well, wait, because humans are different here? Is that what's
yeah. And that's all about accreditation. So
well,
it's not
it's
like you duplicating like the anatomy
oh, my
classic and
friend, my
that.
friend, my friend, my friend. It's all about money. It's all about
Yeah,
money and controlling.
yeah,
Controlling you because they're of course going to say, well, your curriculum isn't quite what the curriculum is
exactly.
here. Yeah, well, for every yeah, anyway, it's just it's crazy. So are they saying like if you were out and about and they got injured because your license is still you're still doing the education requirements so you can get your license activated here as well, but nevertheless they're saying like they don't want you to touch them? I mean, are they stupid?
Yeah, yeah, it's
So,
it's 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 all about, I think, the
yeah,
money, as you said, and this
it's
whole
money,
idea
it's
that the
control.
curriculum is different and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, the education you went through had to have included other things that are not included in a U.S. medical
and
education.
it was longer
Well, there you go. So,
because it's a
all
true
righty.
undergraduate degree. So, foreign medical graduates they start literally from high school and
Yeah,
you do a 6-7 year program, then
yep,
you become a junior doctor, then you do internship and residency, so it's a lot longer.
yep. And so there you go. And so again, this all gets back to this idea about if people only have a limited frame around whatever an activity is, they're going to have limits in the usefulness or effectiveness of what they're talking about. So just to kind of bring this a little bit to closure, when I look at this diagram, I cannot argue with the fact that what they've put here doesn't map. It maps to the change grid, no mistake about it. But it tells such a tiny fraction of the story that I think if someone is marketing this as being the answer to whatever it is that ails you, that that is a great misrepresentation
Yeah,
of what the whole story is going to be. And yeah, it'll be effective with a certain percentage of the population that it just happens to match for. But what about all the rest of the clients that we have that really don't have an issue as far as their ability goes or the challenge? They got a good match there. It's a good balance, but they don't think it's important, or they don't have the capacity to practically fit it into their life. And meanwhile, we're looking at them going like, yes, but your skill is fine and your challenge is fine. Therefore, everything should be just fine.
right, right.
It's like, no.
Hey, T,
Yes.
to me, what's interesting about this model and other models as well is that the solutions that they give out without those other dimensions.
Mm,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Imagine that, to have a solution given to you or an answer given to you about navigating your life situation.
Yeah.
And it is completely excluding how important it is to you or size. So it's so generic. Will it even work?
and
Right.
that's why they gotta come back. Right,
Right.
you always got to go back
Exactly.
to the guru, you got to go back to the book, you got to go back
Right.
to the pill.
You'll need more coaching sessions. That's right. And the
Is
other
that the
thing,
a placebo?
just to finish this diagram off, I'm deeply troubled by the center of it. So they're saying that if I'm in a situation where there is a perfect moderate balance between my skill level and the challenge, that am I a place of nothing? Am I in a place of everything? I think I'm in a place more of nothing because I'm not aroused and I'm not bored and I'm not in flow yet, and I'm not in control. This is a place of not being instead of a place of being.
Mm.
So I have an issue there. There are a lot of different models of human behavior that when we did your training in comparative human typological analysis, we would look at 4 type models and 5 type models, and we'd look at 8 type models and 9 type models. Well, this is technically a 9 type model that they're only showing 8 pieces because they're saying like the only possibility is low, 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 medium, low, high, medium, high, 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 medium, high, low, and there's no possibility for medium, medium. Well, the moment someone acknowledges that, oh no, medium, medium actually exists, that introduces the 9th element. The 9th element is the one that's always in the center. So if you look at any quadrant based type personality system, you're going to go like, oh, you're a driver and amiable and analytical and expressive. You're a D, I, S, or C. Can't you be in the middle? And the people who acknowledge the existence of the middle are the people who would turn a 4 type model into a 5 type model, or an 8 type model into a 9 type model.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well,
I have a question, G.
Yeah.
In terms of, we were talking about flow and where it maps on the change grid. As a whole experience, because I remember Chris asking about like the meditation.
Yes.
How far from the center can you go before you lose that kind of detachment?
Oh,
good question.
Because here's the thing, when I'm looking at the research about the sports medicine research about the zone, right? They're experiencing it, but they're not trying to force the issue. So they seem to be detached based on the research. They're detached. They're not forcing the issue. They're aligned with the issue.
Yeah.
And I think that positions them. So I was thinking about that idea of detachment, like how far does it go?
Yeah. Well, let me kind of address that from 2 different angles. The first one is that there is a certain exactness to the whole thing. And so I would say to you that the place in the change grid where you are going to be most detached from whatever's going on is the exact center. 6-6, don't step off of it. Don't lean any direction. You be right there. And that's the place where the detachment is most complete and most comfortable for the person to be experiencing work. By the way, Nasir, if you weren't on our calls, we talk about detachment, happy to fill in any blanks for you. So feel free to ask any question, but this idea about being emotionally detached, so you can be in the world, but not of it. You can observe what's going around, happening around you, and allow yourself that separation from it so that you can examine it more carefully, more cleanly, more whatever. Now, so that's the exact answer. But Brian, the practical answer is that we would say that you are usefully detached anywhere inside of the green circle. Anywhere in the green circle. So obviously, as you move away in any direction, you are moving from detachment to attachment. But someone who moves out grid is attaching in a different way than someone who's moving up grid or in grid or down grid or any other direction you want to go. It doesn't have to be just 4 cardinal directions. It could be in between. Nevertheless, the further away you go, detachment gives rise to attachment, and maximum attachment is out here at the powerless point. And so you see her for your, I don't know if this is going to be confusing or whatever, but you see that there are these 4 red spots. We call those powerless points, but in truth, they're all the exact same point. And we can turn the change grid into a change sphere and put the center of the change grid at the North Pole and the 4 extreme danger zones, the 4 powerless points at the South Pole on that. So that helps us to better understand and integrate other models of behavior as well. We generally don't even bring that up as something that exists until people are deeper in their training. But if we're going to use the language, you should at least have some framework around what we're talking about there. So yeah, Brian, detachment is going to suffer as you move in any direction to any degree. But we believe inside of the green circle, things are going darn well for you. So you're doing just fine, just fine. Between the green circle and the red circle, what do I always say? What's happening between the green circle and the red circle? This is where,
Dysfunction.
well, dysfunction is way out here past the red circle, outside the red circle. Between the green and the red, we say this is where life is lived.
Life is little, yeah.
This is where life is lived, you know, because we got lots of situations in our life that might put us slightly up grid, where we might be a little worried or anxious about it, or at the same time, oh, got to go back to that diagram real quick. And I know we're coming up at the top of the hour, but I want to just say this. Do you believe that as they are representing anxiety, that this at least feels like an inherently negative experience? Does that kind of, are you picking up on that implication, or can you make anxiety also mean something positive?
It seems like it's negative.
I think they're calling it, they're kind of inferring that it's negative, but let's give you a variation of the word anxiety. When you are experiencing anxiety, one could say you're feeling anxious about
Right.
something. Is it not possible for me to feel anxious about something that's good?
Absolutely.
Right. What about anticipation? Remember, you guys have heard me say this so many times that that the whole point of a roller coaster is to put you here on the change grid. It's supposed to, you know, make you feel like you are somehow or another being put into a dangerous situation, even though intellectually, no, it's been engineered to keep you safe. It's still this feeling that you are about to confront something that could kill you, or something that's going to threaten you in a great way. And that's why when people get off of a good roller coaster, they're happy and jumping up and down and giving themselves high fives like they accomplished something, when in truth, all they did was sit in a place where they were, you know, hopefully very well, what to say, seat belted in, or, you know, anchored into the thing. So anxious, I'm feeling anxious about something, could be excitement, could be whatever. They don't seem to really put that out there. So talking about living life, upgrade could make you nervous, but upgrade could also make you really kind of looking forward to something, excited about something, you know, a thrill seeker. But that's life is lived. Yes, Edie, go ahead.
Yeah, you know what? I just remember that Fritz Perls, remember In and Out of the Garbage Can, Gestalt Therapy,
Yeah.
said that the difference between excitement and anxiety is that anxiety was excitement without enough oxygen, i.e. breathing, to support it. So he did distinguish between the two, that
Yeah.
that excitement had a positive energy behind it, as a but I hear what you're saying about the roller coaster, where that is anxiety, it is fear. But anyway, I just wanted to point out that he made that extinction.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
thank you for that, Edie. And also Nasir just chatted over something to everybody about anticipation. And that's why I'm just saying, like, you can't take this section when you're saying, hey, if you have a low level of ability and a high level of challenge, you're in that situation, you're going to feel anxiety. And I went like, I could also feel excitement, and I could feel anticipation, and I could feel, I want to say, expectation. I could feel all kinds of stuff up here. And that's how we get into the adjective map. Anyway, that's pretty much our time for today. I do want to quickly show you the other piece I had ready, depending on how our conversations went. And hopefully I'll remember where this is. But I did a little search and found a website called verywellmind.com. I know nothing about it, but back in February, someone wrote an article that was in turn medically reviewed. I'm not sure why, based on what it's talking about. But one of the things that it talks about is the characteristics and the, right here, how to achieve flow. And as I started to read through this, I kind of went like, wait. There's more to it than that. Like, for example, look, Brian, they're saying that the neuroscience of flow is all about dopamine. So that's what's being related. And yes, dopamine is part of the story that's out grid, but there are increased levels of endorphins that are happening. There might be some, what do you call the thing that people get? Not an adrenaline rush, adrenaline and I'll remember in just a second, but it's another neurochemical that also gets pulled into play when you're here. Not just adrenaline. It's another kind of rush. You guys have to think about that. Anyway, so hopefully I won't forget about this page. So if someone will just kindly write down verywellmind.com. Maybe I can find this easily enough and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them. This is going to get into exactly what you were talking about before you turned on the recording about how all this gets out there, and then it becomes, you know, kind of, I won't say a marketing ploy, but certainly it becomes, you know, a platform on which people come and get quick answers to what they're looking for.
That's right. Consumers want simple, quick answers. And there's a lot of people out there who want to be in our industry, but like I said, they're talent heavy. They're good in front of an audience. They could be a very good trainer, a very good coach, a very good, whatever it happens to be, but they don't have content. And so they end up glomming on to somebody else's content. I mean, hopefully they get certified. Isn't the whole point of a university education that you walk into it knowing I don't have content, and fine, I'll give you 4 or 6 or more years of my life and a whole lot of money because you're going to give me content that I can use. And then there's other people who go like, well, I can just say that I've got the right content or whatever. I can use somebody else's content. I can just take
T, I see that so much with professional speakers. Whatever the buzzword is, they read a couple chapters in a book and become an authority and expert on it.
Well, you know, Edie, I think I shared with you that that's why I only went to one National Speakers Association meeting and then left and never went back. Because people were, you know, we're sitting at this dinner table, good 8-10 people, whatever, and they're asking me about my work and about my questions and about, you know, my ideas about tension management and on and on and on. And then they're like writing notes and drawing little diagrams. And I'm kind of going like, I can't be here. These people are going to take my stuff. And I don't care if you take my stuff as long as you tell somebody it was my stuff. You know, I get that. Or take my stuff and add something to it and find out that's your stuff. But don't just take my stuff.
Right.
Never went back to anything with the National Speakers Association. Yeah. Okay, anywho, that's our time for today. So Tuesday should be just fine. I'm so glad the internet cooperated and we didn't have any service outages. But you know, we're still having our problems here with our internet. So hopefully we'll have good days moving forward. All right, so with that, thanks so much, everybody. Is this 4th of July weekend?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, have a great 4th of July, and we'll talk again on Tuesday. So thanks so much, everybody. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
Everyone. Bye-bye.